All right, we're back. I guess I am hosting now. I genuinely do want Amy to join this. I'll try to message her or something because I do want to know what happened to her. I'm curious about her trajectory, but hopefully she'll get back on here. But otherwise, anyone else want to jump in on anything? What were we talking about?
We were talking about,
Transgenderism.
I think, about eugenics and the sort of. I wanted to ask if you'd ever used any dating apps, Richard, and what
Well,
your thoughts
yes,
are
I've
on
used
these.
dating. I mean, I
We'd love to hear an
well, don't you?
anecdote. I think
Well,
I speak for everyone.
I actually got on Bumble not long ago, and then there was actually like some stupid news story written about it. That was pretty funny. But I back in the day, I used like Match.com. This was like 15 or 20 years ago now. A lot has changed.
Did you ever have any interesting stories on Bumble or anything of the sort?
Well, yeah, but none that I could repeat. I mean, you know,
Oh,
Out of
we're
like
not a.
respect for the women, or
well, out of respect for myself, perhaps. No,
oh, okay.
Let's not presume. You don't have to presume it's
All right,
women.
all right,
We're a
that's
modern
my bad.
society.
no. Yeah, but um, yeah. So I think Amy Therese won't come on here. Let me send her a message though, real quick. I'm very
Has
curious.
there been a has there been like a cold war between the two of you?
Well, there kind of has been. I remember when she was like, how would you describe her now? Like,
Uh,
she's almost like a
I,
Trump
uh,
person now or something.
she's kind of like a Greek-esque figure. Um,
Greek? What does that mean?
yeah, she's kind of like a pre-modern woman in modern times.
Well, okay,
If I
but she used to be a Marxist of some kind, and I did find
listen,
her. I
that's
did find her very interesting, and we conversed a bit, and everything was good. And then I don't know. I maybe I got mad at her because I felt like she was just becoming a kind of Trump tard or something. Um,
no, she's in a state of becoming, but
constant becoming.
her true identity is emerging right now. So it's polarizing, but it's kind of a litmus test too
Oh, a litmus test for what?
for who can like understand kind of like the future of dissident politics.
I kind of get where she's coming from. I've noticed this with a lot of leftists. Like, it's funny because I think the last time when we were speaking, like 5 minutes ago, I said that I think the whole gender ideology, like whatever you want to say about it, it might ultimately be eugenic. And then she said, "No, it's dysgenic. It's dysgenic. It's gross. Get that stuff away from me." And so she doesn't understand the meaning of those terms by the fact that she was saying that. And I think but I can kind of see this. Like, I see a lot of these like MAGA communists and leftists use like degenerate unironically and things like that. Pretty interesting.
Because it is degenerate. It is.
Well, yeah, but you're just kind of
It's new politics, new becomings are emerging. It's very
It's not.
exciting.
It's not really new as much as it is a rediscovery and a regrounding of what Marxism-Leninism is.
what
What we
See, but
have.
transgenderism. Give me a
Well,
break.
that's kind of like a gay way
Give
of
me a
describing
break.
yeah,
it,
no,
though.
I think what we're trying to do is like cut this in a scientific way. So yes, it's absolutely degenerate, but like it's not dysgenic, it's eugenic because it's ultimately like turning infertile people that would have otherwise had children. So they're kind of like being cut out of the future.
Right. I mean,
Well,
that
it
was my
serves more
point.
than one purpose.
Amy, thanks
It
for
serves
joining
more than one
us. You can
purpose.
speak.
Okay, so I was just thinking, and I think if theoretically we lived in a world where the only way to acquire a baby or made of your genetic material was through the natural process of reproduction, then something like the transgender, like sterilization shit, like that would ultimately have a eugenic effect insofar as it would be taking these like degenerate freaks out of the gene pool and preventing them from reproducing themselves.
Right.
But I think what we're now starting to get into is this like transhumanist arena where you can get these like absolutely fucking degenerate homosexual Buffalo Bill motherfuckers who will adopt everything that I've said for like a year and a half, but sanitize it, wear me as a skin suit, have like other homosexuals come in their fucking new vagina, but then they can just like manufacture a baby made out of like skin grafts, made out of like the scalp, made out of their Buffalo Bill scalp shit. Like that's where we're going with this. We are not like cutting out the tall trees where they're literally like making it possible for the most disgusting and dysgenic people alive to reproduce chemically and like magically in labs.
I agree, but aren't isn't there dysgenic factors that have been going on all across society in general? I mean, like we have been breeding
Yeah,
for
true.
obesity and stupidity, and heart disease is actually
It's
an
true.
interesting one.
It's true.
And so to like solve, I agree that like
I just think we need
transsexuality, it's
floods.
more in your
We're at a
face.
point where we need floods. Just flood the earth, salt the earth, start again. That's where I'm at the moment.
Well,
I
Amy,
hear you.
I wanted to ask you, how do you have this like new like trans stalker that like tried to steal your identity and like tried to like steal your friends? And
Okay,
the other thing that
yeah.
I noticed with like trans people, they're talking about like womb transplants now, and like they want to give birth.
Okay, so the easiest way to explain this is to articulate this concept invented by a Canadian social scientist named Ray Blanchard. And the idea is this thing called autogynephilia, which is where a
Right.
homosexual male is sexually titillated by the thought of himself as a female, not by actual females, but by this narcissistic inverted version of himself as a female. And so, because they can't reproduce, because they are in fact sterile, because what they like to do is come in the rectums of other homosexual males, what they do is that they find like a female whose skin they want to adopt. They do skinwalker shit, where what they do is they hollow you out, find a respected institution, hollow it out, wear its skin, and then demand respect for doing so. So what these fucking sociopaths do is they take all the things that I get murdered alive for saying in the timeline when no one else has the balls to do so because they're all so fucking low T. They take all those takes and then they sand the edges off them and then they wear them like a skin suit and then they take all my friends and fucking alienate people against me, and so I have to just be this constant warrior against the most degenerate goblins on earth. And it's a very exhausting process, but ultimately, like, these people are so far beneath me that there's never going to be
What?
any confusion. But the thing that they get off on is the idea of adopting the skin and the identity and like being inside and under the skin of
Why
another
you
human
specifically?
being. Oh, it's because anyone who has gigastacy female energy, that's what they need to feed off of. They're emotional vampires. Like they can't breathe, they can't create. So anyone who's super horny female energy, that's what they want because they are ultimately like in every way they are male. And so what they need is to vampire that kind of essence of female. They need to suck that out of you. Kind of like a succubus, weirdly enough. But yeah, they feed on it. They're parasites, ultimately. And I have
Is
such
it
horny female energy that they come and they feed off that like fuel.
is it related to like how like the nerds that become transsexuals that like start playing video games where it's like, oh, I'm playing as like a female and like I get off to the idea of like me being a man? Is it similar to that, or is it like almost like a idolization thing? Like it's like this is a woman that I want to
Oh
become.
shit! You know what it's similar to? Actually, you don't even have to think about it that hard. It's basically what like when like really pathetic nerdy guys identify with anime girls. It's like the exact same phenomena. Only
Yes.
instead of just anime girls, they're doing it now with real women. Like they take a woman and they turn her into a persona or whatever, like an
Yeah,
internet
it's I,
profile.
I really want to sort of reiterate, it's not actually about me as such. But like because like they don't know me and they don't care to, and it's not actually as freaky as it is. I don't think it's personal. I think it's oddly impersonal and has very little to do with me. It's like literally a very internal kind of solipsistic thing in their own head. They just take like the specter of a woman and inhabit that because it's not me. It's got nothing to do with me. It's not about me. It's not personal in a weird way. Like it seems like a very personal thing, but it's kind of not. I don't know quite how to explain it. It's just very narcissistic and inwardly focused rather than actually connecting with me in any way.
Yeah. No, and I agree with you on like a lot of this discussion. I think the transgender question is really deep, and it has a lot of different like there's different phenomena that are occurring. I do think there's a social contagion effect, and I think there's a kind of understandable because what we're seeing. I mean, men in general are more perverted than women. Men are more likely to be homosexuals. There are more gay men than there are lesbians. You know, men are more likely to fetishize things. Men are more likely to be perverse. Men are more likely to rape. Men are more likely to do all sorts of things. But so but
So
what
wait,
we're
wait, wait,
seeing
wait, wait.
now,
Can I just break in
yeah,
right
sure,
there?
go ahead.
If what we're talking about is something that is like statistically naturally more likely in terms of something like men are more likely to rape, do we really call that perverse? I'm not sure that we do. Evolutionarily, it's
I
not
didn't call
perverse.
rape perverse. I mean, I think rape is something else. What
I think
men
it's
are more likely
extremely
to be
natural.
perverts.
Like, I'm not justifying it on a
Well,
moral level, but I
yeah,
wouldn't say that it's a natural like aberration. It's not contradictory with like the continuation of the species. It in fact fuels it. Not that
I
I'm, again,
agree.
this is not a moral endorsement thereof. This is just simply talking in terms of like how animals reproduce.
Right. Yeah, I agree with that on a basic level and with your non-endorsement.
The,
But I was talking about doing things that are obviously perverse, like obsessing about feet or wearing ladies'
Oh,
underwear or
okay,
something.
yeah,
There's just
yeah,
something
yeah,
look,
absolutely, yeah,
this is
no.
not
bizarre about it.
this is not an organic, roots, coming from the roots phenomena. This is being promoted by the U.S. government and by private institutions. I mean, just last year, the U.S. government literally spent $2.6 billion promoting LGBTQ organizations and funds, not only here in the U.S. but around the world.
Yeah, but
This is a domestic and foreign
we've
policy of the
seen
U.S.
that
government.
we've seen this happen before in U.S. history. It's not just a total psyop. Or not U.S. history, world history. Like this happens at certain points in civilizations. I'm not saying obviously the U.S. government it's facilitating it and so on. I agree with you, but like what you seem to be implying there is that this is some kind of psyop by evil, Satanists in the government, and I just think
It is
that's a
evil.
little too
It
easy.
is evil.
Okay, but like, what is declaring it evil? Like, how does that help us understand what's going on?
It helps us understand that this is a malicious,
Well,
anti-human
that's what I'm
endeavor.
saying. It's not.
What
This
is
just sounds kind of like
Why
QAnon
are you so
nonsense. I mean,
hesitant to call out the fact that this is an evil, fucked up thing going on?
I mean,
what is
there's a
it?
difference between it being evil and it being malicious. Like malicious, like ascribes like some sort of like intent. Like there's some sort of like conspiring
There
force.
is an
To,
intent.
like,
There's a very
Well,
explicit
that
intent.
seems like that seems
describe
pretty
like
dubious.
don't just say the U.S. government's doing this. Like you kind of have to do more than it. Just like what
Can I
they're
also add,
trying
like,
to
I
Crowds
think
do.
up in
it's
other
much,
places. Like
for
you
lack of
see it
a
in like
better
Weimar
term,
Germany.
yeah, but for lack of a better term, I think it's far more dialectical than to suggest that it's simply top down. I think that's a total
I agree.
fallacy.
I agree.
Yeah, I mean, you're overlooking the fact that there are emergent phenomena that happen behaviorally, and whether or not they're dysgenic or gross or evil or whatever, it doesn't mean that there's a conspiracy of a few guys in a back room
Totally
directing the whole
agree.
process. It can be emergent.
There are, but I think it's, they're mutually constitutive. There are all these moving parts, all moving at once, and then playing into and bouncing off of each other. The idea that this is just some top-down op like MK Ultra, some bullshit, is fucking farcical as far as I'm concerned. Sorry, and I'm not even suggesting that that was your claim, but I just want to put that out there. It really bothers me when people frame this in this very like top down, they're turning the freaking frogs gay thing. I think they absolutely, we know they're turning the frogs gay,
Because it
but like,
imagines it implies that we can like solve it with one weird trick or something. It's like
well, like I wish the
let's elect
government would that.
DeSantis and then no one will be gay or
Well,
whatever.
like
And
I
it's
wish
like
they were
no,
that
this is
competent. I wish they were that competent and had that much control, because that would be an apparatus we could take over and actually wield to the good. But they're
right.
not. There's so much
The
incompetence in
fact of the
trying.
matter is, the vast majority of people all around the world, in the billions, do not support this LGBTQ, perversion and
So
disgusting
what?
activity. And the
So
only people
why is it?
promoting it, and pushing it, are these Western institutions based in the U.S. and Europe. You see
So
countries
what?
like China, Russia.
So
You
what?
can name them.
That,
So
that,
what?
well,
What I'm
that
saying is,
civilizations always come
this
from
is
China.
this is
They're
just
from
another
the
factor.
barbarian. No, but
This
the
is just
plebs don't create the civilization. So the idea that, oh, this is an elite pushing it. Well, that's an elite that's created every culture. So what are you talking about?
there's a difference between, rootless globalist institutions and people-based civilizations. There's a very clear difference.
Well,
Okay.
what is America? I'm just curious.
America at the moment doesn't exist.
Okay.
Okay,
Well,
so we're
do
just
you see
having
how?
angels cadets on the head of a pin. This is just silliness now, totally utopian nonsense.
Yeah,
Anyway,
we can't.
What's
I love
silly
you all,
about
but
it?
I've got to
Actually
run.
remove
What's
you.
silly
I've got
about
to
it?
run. I love you all. I have
Well,
to run. Enjoy the rest of the conversation.
It's
And I
so
hope
No,
to,
stay.
and I hope to share space with you again soon.
Please don't go.
I'm in demand in many places.
you are.
I am an e-waifu of the highest caliber, and I have to go back up other people right now. But take care. I love you all, and thank you so much for having me. Bye
I'll
bye.
see you later, Amy. I'm glad we're back on good terms. It feels
Right,
better.
absolutely. It feels nice.
Yes.
Okay. Take care. I love it. I love everyone. Okay. Bye.
Bye.
awesome.
All right.
I wanted to
Anyone
ask.
else want to? Yeah, go ahead. Go for it.
I wanted to ask actually Amy. I mean, she disappeared now, but I was also like interested in some of her backstory because she started off as like a Orthodox communist, and then like had a falling out with like the dirtbag left, and
Yeah.
people from the right. I mean, you contacted her. Eric Stryker like had a little bit of contact with her as well, and I wanted to know like how she got to where she is now. But
Well, I don't know. I think I was probably, maybe I was sending and being sent against. I feel like I felt like she became almost like a reactionary Trump tard at some point, and I was kind of like, "What is wrong with you? You used to be interesting." But yeah, just this like brief interaction, I think she's back. But I am curious too. I think we would have to like pin her down and get her to talk for at least an hour or so about her trajectory and background. But I too am interested.
see, I know you're not familiar with like this microsphere and like I guess you could call it like the feel right and how we've been like battling with these guys who they call themselves like the left wing irony dudes, like Polish excellence and garbage ape and stuff. And I know she had problems
I
with
have
them.
no
like-
idea what. I have
And
no
sometimes I forget-
earthly idea what you're talking about.
Sometimes I forget how removed you. I mean, I used to listen to like the old altright.com podcast you did with like Greg Conti and
Yeah,
Hannibal.
Hannibal Bateman. Yeah, John Camillo. Yeah, it's good stuff.
Yeah. So, what's the next topic you want to bring up?
It's anything goes. Obvious, my favorite Australian. What's up, man? What's going on?
Who are you talking to?
Obvious sock puppet. He always has something funny to say.
Yeah, my bad. Sorry.
Are you also Australian?
No, I'm not Australian. No.
Okay. Obvious. If you don't speak, I'm gonna have to move on.
Oh no,
I can't.
I was gonna say something about space that you held earlier a while back that I was waiting to participate, but I fell asleep waiting for my turn. And first of all, I wanted to apologize. And thing is, like, it kind of like plays into the whole LGBTQ stuff, whereby people were casting aspersions and like excoriating the whole LGBTQ, the fact that LGBTQ people exist, and that the whole Muslim town. There's a Muslim town in Michigan or something that banned the rainbow flag.
Right.
Yeah, and which to me is sort of befuddling because I'm an atheist, but I was raised a Muslim, right? And I'm gay. And just to see
There's a lot going on there.
Oh yeah. and just to see these people, like make fun of Islamic countries, like they ostracize gays, they imprison them, blah blah blah. Like show like sort of there is Western superiority aspect, and the West is superior in that sense. I'm not ashamed of admitting that. But seriously, do people really like when they see what they do to the LGBTQ communities in Islamic countries? I mean, I'm talking about Western conservatives. When they see
Is he still talking?
I don't hear anything.
And he cut out for me too.
That's probably for
Yeah,
me
he
too.
left the space.
Okay, that's fine.
I mean, I'm finding like the constant like LGBT talk to be like a little boring at this point. I mean, there is like an issue on the right with like novelty seeking, and I know like every spaces or every like opportunity to talk could be like someone's first time hearing these talking points, but I don't know. I can't take it anymore. It's starting to get on my nerves.
Is there a queue?
I mean, there the elephant in the room, right, is that we were just in that space, and there were like a bunch of things that we were gonna talk about, kinda, that we ended up not talking about just to like spare.
Such as?
I think Richard walked away from his phone.
Oh no, I got
Oh
unmuted,
no,
Oh,
so
I'm back.
I'm guessing
Yeah.
you don't want to talk about those things.
What?
I don't. We were. I don't remember what the things were.
Richard, what's your
We had
stance
like
on?
a couple things that
What are
came
we
up
talking?
around like.
Hold on.
Okay, go ahead.
Richard, yeah, what's your stance on Camille Paglia?
I think she's very interesting. Like I like
Let's
a lot
go.
of her stuff. Yeah.
I mean, that also will beg the question: what are your thoughts on Bronze Age pervert?
I've answered this. You guys always ask me this. I've answered it. Like,
well, Richard, do you remember Paglia in the 90s?
Yeah, I remember her. I mean, to a degree. I mean, keep in mind, I was in high school in the 90s, but I do remember her as a kind of like a Christopher Hitchens type, this public intellectual and someone that, had hot takes and everyone had to address, on some level. But yeah, she's an interesting woman. Obvious.
Is there
Yeah, g'day, Richard. I got a good question for you. Yeah, g'day. Yeah, so when you're the Secretary of the Navy in the Trump administration, did any of this transsexualism have to come up under your reign? What was your policy on it? Did you try and stamp it out?
Yes, I did, but I kept in mind that it was the Navy, and so its reputation had to be maintained. So there had to be, at least rumors of homosexuality running rampant, if not the actual thing.
Yeah, YMCA type stuff. Eh?
No, the Navy has. I mean, it's almost surely undeserved. They just have a reputation for being gay. But,
what did Churchill say?
You didn't necessarily need to know that. You didn't. You might not have known that as an Australian.
It's implicit, isn't it? Implicit homosexuality in the Navy.
Last stand. Yeah. All right. Do you have something valuable to say?
Sorry, not today.
Okay. Adrian? Yeah, there you are.
Yes.
All right, what's up?
If I was going to ask a question right now, it'd be related to music. So I know that you have an interest in synth pop, goth music overall. And Ace talking about music, especially rock and roll, like in the last few spaces we've been doing. What do you think the direction of like alternative music is going in generally right now? Is there a future for the kind of countercultures that you saw growing up in the 1980s, or is this over?
I think rock is dead and music is over. And it's not even necessarily the fault of rock and roll itself. I think rock and roll is dead in the sense that there's no real, like, I think saying there's no real alternative, or saying something's alternative rock is almost redundant. I mean, rock music seems to be exhausted culturally. It's kind of reiterating older stuff, or ironically reinterpreting other styles. There's no universal mainstream because everything has been fragmented, with the exception of like sports and comic book movies, I guess, but even those are kind of losing their luster. We've just had this fragmentation of culture where there's no one mainstream or no one band that kind of defines a time in the way that I think U2 did, for instance, that Nirvana did, that the Beatles did, obviously. I mean, there's going to be no band like that because our culture is so fragmented, for better and for worse, I guess.
So true. I mean, people talk about the death of the monoculture a lot, and there's this guy, Lindy Man, who coined the term stuck culture, that like essentially we live in like perpetual nostalgia.
Yeah.
They had that music festival, the When We Were Young festival, which was like the big rock festival of the moment, where it's Blink-182 and like the emo bands of like the 2000s, and no one under 25 went.
Yeah.
So I mean, the biggest genre right now is this thing, hyperpop, where it's like it's a form of insider music that's like attempting to be outsider music, and it's
But
like
that was like 6 months ago.
See, that is like 6
Intentional.
months
I was
ago.
like, I'm in a Help music video like from 5 years ago. Okay, so it's over. It's already happened. I see we got Pariah up in here. Pariah, we talked about James O'Keefe in the last thing. We missed you.
Oh yeah, please tell us about the music video.
Hi, Angel. Wow, so happy to be here in this Richard Spencer space. That's a good coincidence because the video uses the Usher song OMG, because James O'Keefe's new project is the O'Keefe Media Project, OMG. Fabulous example of stuck culture. You know, you're taking a song from over a decade ago. There's no song now. There are no songs now that go viral.
Right.
There's no song that you could use for a promotional video like that everyone's going to recognize. Because even hyperpop, like, no, come on, that's not. People don't know what hyperpop is. No one knows what that is. Like, the mainstream music right now is the lowest form of, like, ghetto rap that is like sort of being and even that is like people don't actually listen to it. It's performative. Like, I can't name a single Ice Spice song, but there's a billboard of her like right next to my apartment for some fucking reason. Yeah.
Well, Richard, what kind of music would save us from this existential crisis? I mean, surely we can go back.
No, we can't.
Abercrombie store music. Sorry.
Chinese hip hop.
I think with Nirvana, there's this, and look, I don't like it when people almost show respect for Nirvana. I've seen like Rolling Stone's greatest LPs of all time, where Nirvana will have like multiple albums as like the greatest album, like it's conceptually brilliant or something. No, it's not actually.
Let's go.
But that doesn't mean it's not great on some level. It kind of like reduces music to a bare minimum of 2 chords in some major cases, but also it's played out of tune and it's screamed, and so it kind of evokes a certain primal quality. I mean, remember in like Das Rheingold by Wagner, they're screaming on stage. There's like the music almost can't express emotion to the point that it becomes just like an outright like yell. And so it's not, even someone like Wagner is willing to go there. And I think Kurt Cobain was a nihilist, and he's kind of willing to break music down to this like bare minimum of, yells and clangs and out of tune strumming and in pain. And I think maybe that's what we need right now.
We need nihilist music.
Yeah, another Kurt Cobain to just reduce to kind of like look up the kimono of music and just reduce it to its bare minimum. So in some ways it's nihilistic, but another way it's kind of primitive. It's getting at some, like I was saying, like one of the most powerful aspects of Das Rheingold is when these slaves who are forging all this stuff just start yelling and screaming and moving on the stage. And it's like the music isn't even expressing an emotion. You have like an actual representation of pain on stage that Wagner was able to accomplish. And I think that's what kind of Kurt Cobain is almost pushing towards. And so I think that's what we need right now. Yeah.
But don't you think in a way we've already like hit that peak? Like we live in a very Dionysian age, and I almost think that, you know, you can only get so drunk before you pass out in a way.
Right.
And it feels like we've already hit that zenith, and I don't really know if we can go any further. Like G.G. Allen already exists. You can only like go so far in a way.
Yeah, I mean, we have and we haven't. I think there are all these contradictions of our time. Like, I talked about this, I think, on a space and then also in my Substack group of like the bourgeois and the Dionysian qualities to transgenderism. And I think all of that was on display like 2 weeks ago at the White House, where, you know, some transgendered woman was like, you know, called out for showing her breast or what have you. There's like two
What
different.
did you think she's hot? That's the debate right now.
No, it can't be hot. It's weird.
Because it's too vulgar?
No, I love, you know, no, I've never been a prude. No one's ever accused me of being a prude when it comes to these matters. No.
Excuse me.
Bare breasts, more bare breasts, the better. That sounds good. Let's go.
Even if they're male breasts.
I'm not that enthused by males.
You're saying there's a disparity there.
I like women. Yeah, it's kind of crazy. I know it's crazy on the online right, but I actually don't hate the female.
You're the only one, Richard.
I might be true. I know a weird way I have good reason to hate all women, but I just somehow don't.
Out of respect.
Yes, I know it's out of like hope that maybe my next relationship won't turn out like the last one. That internal hope that is ultimately kind of false, I guess. But yeah, no, I don't hate women. I'm not a misogynist, etc. But yeah, I'd like to see, you know, a woman with bare breasts. That would be a little water nymph, you know.
We'll try to set that up.
Check DMs.
If I were ever
Check
blessed
DMs.
with being president, we would have like nude women, you know, prancing all over the White House. I'm not offended by that at all. But maybe this is the reason why I'm never going to be president, among many others. But yeah, there's this bourgeois quality to LGBTQ, whatever, in the sense that it's not like Dionysus in like Euripides' Bacchanalian plays. Dionysus is a dangerous figure. Like where he comes, he might tear you limb from limb or destroy your civilization. There's a kind of primal, dangerous quality to Dionysus. And I think you could see that in a Dionysian movement like the gay movement previously, where they're anti-system, they're anti-society, they're anti-family, they're anti-father, they're anti-mother. And I don't ultimately support that, and I don't ultimately join in with them, but I kind of respect the negativity of it all, or maybe negativity is not the right way, the Dionysian quality. Like it's truly a dangerous movement. But what gay rights are in the United States is it's a very middle class movement. So it's like, congratulations, you're no longer a threat to the system. We're going to neutralize you. And now you can have a job. You can work at your own cubicle and you can choose your own gender and change it if you want to. You can get married and divorced and, you know, pay taxes or whatever. Like it's this utterly fundamentally middle class movement. And it's all about harm avoidance and like reducing suicide and self-actualization. It's just inherently bourgeois and thus inherently contemptible. Whereas actual Dionysianism, even if it should be ultimately opposed, there's a kind of respect you can have for it, much like the respect I showed Kurt Cobain. You know, like Kurt Cobain is a nihilist at the end of the day, but he's representing a real force that you at least have to kind of contemplate. Whereas like gay rights, it's just this middle class. And again, it emerged in corporations even before it emerged in politics. So I would say my criticism of it is that it's not even Dionysian. And you can kind of see this with these like millennials and Zoomers who are changing their genders or whatever. And it's like, look how special I am. I'm demisexual, or I've changed this or whatever. And it's like, you're just not actually special. You know, we're not gonna value you as an individual or something. Like, again, you see this like inherently middle class quality to these movements. It's about not obviously kind of non-special, boring people finding some way of like being actualized or something. It's just utterly contemptible.
But doesn't the Kurt Cobain 90s angst, wouldn't people say that's where the destruction of the monoculture started? Was that kind of...
Yeah, it kind of was, but maybe it needed to be cleaned off. You know, like the Cold War was over, what America was going to be was in question, and we almost, sometimes you need to clean the slate. I think we definitely need to clean the slate. You know, now we need a movement of nihilism to kind of wipe all this shit away, and then we can build something on top of it.
Well,
so nihilism is important. Nihilism is like, it shouldn't just. This is where I don't like when the right wingers are like, that's degenerate or that's dysgenic, and they don't even know what those words mean. It's like nihilism has its place. You know, you need to wipe. I mean, my son knows this. Sometimes you're building something, like you're building these blocks and it's just not working, and you kind of enjoy knocking it over, and then you build it again. Like that's what we need. That's how we need to understand these nihilistic movements. And certainly, like, you know, a great deal of American culture deserves to die. It's weak and sick and stupid and contemptible, and they're just a bunch of fat morons living high in the hog. You know, all of this needs to be cleansed and wiped away and demoralized so that something greater can be built upon it. So nihilism has its place in the world.
I guess
is there a queue?
Sorry, excuse me.
No, go ahead. I was just trying to jump in after you finished. Go ahead.
Well, I mean, if the nihilism is like the start and then it ends with something romantic, or like you said, building something on a foundation, then I would understand. But in the 90s, it seemed like all you had was destruction. And then today you see the same similar attitude. So I don't know how many people are using nihilism as like part of this bigger project. It seems like,
yeah, but look, as we noted in the, like earlier on, like I'm kind of I straddle the millennial and Gen X. I definitely identify more with Gen X culture, and I don't identify with the millennials. I don't like them. And
let's go.
Whatever you want to say about the like cynical about everything, cigarette smoking, Christopher Hitchens reading, black leather jacket donning, you know, Gen Xer, there's at least something there. Whereas the millennial is like watching Marvel movies and, you know, like thinking that one cute little trick will, like, you know, reduce harm, you know, for Americans, or improve their lives, or actualization. Like there's something so kind of hopeful and silly among millennials. So there's something to that Gen X cynicism. I like it. I resonate with it.
You would say the millennials are kind of like the 80s optimism, maybe, to counterpart with the 90s nihilistic realism or whatever.
Yeah, I guess so. But they're not that. I mean, the 80s were cool.
Yeah, it was romantic too. That's the thing. Like, it's not just like a Good Morning America ad that's like devoid of reality. It's you know, it's romantic, it's communitarian. Yeah. But I guess if you don't like that, then you would say, well, that's fake. I would rather be a Christopher Hitchens leather jacket wearing. But I don't know if that's the dichotomy.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know where I got on this. I just think that there's something to be said for nihilism. It serves a place. There needs to be a tearing down of things that can no longer stand or no longer deserve to. And so I would actually respect an actual Dionysian or nihilistic movement at this time. I think that would be authentic to where we are.
Well, like, is there a good example of a nihilistic, like, artistic movement that was like basically totally destructive in the way that you're describing? Because when I think back to movements that were like there have been like all kinds of music movements that have been entirely motivated by just wanting to be the antithesis of like everything that they're surrounded by. Like even like there was the 80s hardcore punk thing, which was just like completely disillusioned with both like the mainstream thing and like the punk rock that preceded it, like the 77 stuff. But that was like it was nihilistic in affect, but it's still totally creative, right? It was creating something that was like completely new and fresh, even if it was like very dark and very simple and like didn't really have that much craft going for it.
Well, I mean,
It's called the Cultural Revolution.
Yeah, I mean, so much of like there was a lot of fascism in, say, Italian futurism, and Evola was interested in Dada, for instance. I'm not even a huge Evola fan, to be honest, but like there was a lot going on in the 20th century that was this push towards something new and kind of, I mean, modern art came out of the fact that like you have photography as a representation of reality. And in some ways, if you imagine painting as, holding a mirror up to nature, as representing the natural world, it doesn't hold a candle, so to speak, up to photography. And so it kind of like forces you to rethink these things. And so what art was going to be, there are some nihilistic energies towards art, and those you could say were degenerate, as the Nazis said, but there was a lot of fasciness going on there as well. And so I do think that, but I think we're almost past that. I mean, one thing that I noticed, like, because I was really recently reading like Arthur Danto's book, What Art Is. It's a fun little book. But it's like all of these movements that were so influential, they would last like 4 years, and they would burn themselves out, or they would try something new, or they would have a falling out with their, colleagues or whatever. And it does seem to me, now granted, I'm an outsider, I'm not following the modern art at all, but it does seem to be that there's this huge stasis to it. Like we've blown up the traditional art academy, and then postmodern art has entered the academy, and we're just like stuck on this conceptual minimalism hijinks, like gerbil wheel, where art hasn't like for instance, even when I'm like back home in Dallas and like visit the Dallas Museum of Art, they have a modernist collection, and I can see stuff there, and some of it's cool, but I can see stuff there that was done in like 1977 or 1988 or 2005. And it's all the same, like I couldn't even place it. Whereas if I flip on a classical music station, I could tell you within 25 years and maybe even within 10 years, like when this piece was written. Like I know what a Mozart symphony sounds like, and I know what Wagner sounds like. It's not just classical music. Those are hugely different, and I could place it in a time. If I go and look at art, I mean, we're going on almost like 100 years now of postmodernism, or 75 years. It's just all the same. It's like stuck in this rut because they can't move beyond that. Like there's this, this problem of photography early on, and the problem of modernization, industrialization, et cetera, that modernism was reacting to. And, again, like what is communism or fascism or Nazism, but like modern art movements on some level. And they were responding to this issue. And then now we're in this like postmodern stasis where we're not moving forward. There's no real crisis. There's no like real raison d'etre for why this stuff should exist. It's just a bunch of like the Basel Art Fair is just a bunch of like billionaires and centimillionaires, hanging out, looking at this stuff, getting drunk, buying prostitutes, and snorting coke. Like it's just all a joke. And there's no crisis that's driving it in the way that there was one driving it in the 20th century. And so I don't know. That's why I'm suggesting like I think this type of situation where we're just like stuck in this postmodern rut, it calls for a little nihilism. I think that would be a positive thing.
Do you mind if I jump in here? I'm
Sure.
waiting. Okay, appreciate it. Love and light. This is Showtime from the Iron Mike. I'm an American patriot, a Detroiter, based here in the People's Republic of China, where I've been for 25 years. I've noticed that
Wow.
you don't talk too much about China, but you do make comments, and I've read through it, and I've been pretty impressed by some of your takes. And just the other day, you commented on the Blinken meeting in China. I had a quick comment, is that there's all this fuss about what he said, and I think you hit the nail on the head. This is a lot of noise. This still feeds into strategic ambiguity. This is a nothing burger. But the real story that people are missing is the fact that Blinken actually got a meeting, a last-minute meeting with Xi Jinping. And what I think is pretty historic and significant about this is that it is highly unlikely he would have got that meeting if he didn't have to give up something. Maybe he got something. And I think only time will tell what really happened. But I would love to hear your insights on that, as well as anything related to China, Kanye West, or Ali Alexander. Thank you very much.
Okay, well, there's a lot there.
What?
Yeah, I mean, China is a fascinating subject. I mean, I think it was a lot of noise, but it was fairly significant. I mean, Biden said in September 2022, I mean, again, I would have to go look at the exact quote. I don't want to misrepresent him, but he kind of sort of said that we would, through military means, defend Taiwan should there be just an outright takeover by force. And I'm sure that they, if such a thing happened, it would be condemned, around the world. But this, I mean, granted, there was a lot of noise involved, and granted, nothing really changed because, ever since Nixon and probably before that, there's been a one China policy. But it did seem to be significant that Blinken said, we've got a one China policy. And we are not going to recognize the sovereignty of Taiwan. And that, again, goes against tough talk by Biden. It goes against Nancy Pelosi traveling there, et cetera, and kind of treating Taiwan as a head of state. So I think it was significant. My take on it, and again, this is an outsider take. This is someone who's not in the loop. I'm not, I'm not even like reading heavily on, American Sino relations. But my take on it is that Washington is truly committed to Ukraine. And the Russian Chinese alliance, I think, got a little bit like too much publicity, 3 months ago or something. I don't think we now have this like bifurcated world and Russia and China are one entity, or I don't think that. But it at least kind of pointed in that direction. And so I think Blinken was kind of drawing that back a little, kind of pumping the brakes, lowering the temperature, and he was maintaining the status quo more or less with China. But the clear meaning of it was that we are focused on Ukraine and we are in this to win it. Like America is willing to get militarily involved should it come to that. And it's certainly willing to spend many more billions on Ukraine. And I think that is true, and I support that.
That's interesting. There's one thing I'll throw out, just that I don't think is common knowledge when it comes to strategic ambiguity. A lot of the times when this strategy is portrayed in the West and the media amongst pundits. They think that the ambiguity is directed towards China. That is, that we are trying to confuse the Chinese and be ambiguous about where we stand with Taiwan. But the reality, the actual strategy of strategic ambiguity was a balancing act between Taiwan and China. And it's to confuse both sides, to
Yeah.
sometimes confuse Taiwan to show support for them, and not because a lot of people forget that it was Chiang Kai-shek and the Taiwanese that were the ones that were aggressively claiming that they were going to invade mainland China, that they were going to take over mainland China all the way up to the 80s, that they would take over mainland China
Right.
and unify the country.
This
So
is
it
going
was
back to like Shanghai Shek kind of, stuff. Yeah. But yeah, that is obviously not going to happen. I mean, that is totally unrealistic.
Any thoughts on
Okay.
Kanye and Ali Alexander, if you don't mind?
Ali Alexander is just a disgusting human being. I don't have more to say on him besides that. I think Kanye is pretty fascinating. I mean, I would give Kanye this. I mean, I do think that his Christianity is authentic, and he's I do think he has some like serious psychological problems that he has to deal with, and so he kind of like a lot of artists. Maybe this is what makes him a good artist, is that he kind of can't focus on anything and moves this way and that and so on. But yeah, I think it's completely over, and I don't. I said some nice things about it, but I said it was authentic. It's not what I would do. It's not the kind of movement that I would join or support, but I kind of recognize its power and as a Christian movement. And but a lot of these people put their eggs in that basket, and they probably feel burned.
Would you expect more things like the Kanye situation to happen? Maybe not as dramatic as that, but just celebrities getting in politics from that very unconventional way. And
well, yeah, I mean, I think both. I mean, I think more celebrities will get involved in politics because they can outdo all these lame politicians like Mike Pence and Ron DeSantis and whatever. But they've got a comparative advantage, to be sure. But I also think they're going to be really genuine Christian reactionary movements. I think that's going to be a major trend. All right.
Yo, Zuki Man's in here.
I want to hear from Innominate, American Bloom.
Innominate, Richard.
Innominate. Okay. Thank you.
Anyway, I was just calling in to ask you about your EU ban. I'm Dr. Duke's genealogist, and we happen to be cousins and share a couple of lines of genealogy. And
you and I do, or you do with Dr. Duke?
I share DNA with both Dr. Duke, Don Black, and you. We're all cousins.
Wow.
Yeah,
I did not know that. How did you discover this?
We have a lot of Jamestown ancestry. But anyway, I wanted to know if your band
how
was.
do you know this? I do have a 23andMe profile. Has this been confirmed, or are you speculating?
Oh no, we're confirmed. Paper trail.
Paper trail. Interesting.
Yes, documentation.
Okay.
Through your direct Spencer line.
Interesting.
Anyway.
I'm very proud of the Spencer line, but I'm just as proud of the Dickenhorst line.
Well, everyone's got their favorites. I was just calling in to see if well, it's true. If your EU ban is like the standard 2-year ban, or if you caught the perma 10-year ban from Hungary.
No, I got a 3-year ban from Hungary, and then I got another EU ban in 2017. That's kind of interesting because it was totally not my fault. It was I got invited to speak at this Polish thing, and then all these like the alt-light reacted and they got me banned. But anyway, it is all over now, so I can travel freely to Europe.
Oh, good. Do you have EU citizenship already?
No, I don't.
Do you want EU citizenship?
Sure. Could you just how I need to talk to you
She's
about this?
begging for the big Spence.
Wait, isn't Richard married?
No, I'm divorced.
Oh, sorry. I don't know. I don't pay attention to any of the movement stuff. But yeah, you should message me privately. I think I can help you. That's all I wanted to say.
Interesting. Okay, thanks. All right. It's always good to be a citizen of many different countries. A rootless cosmopolitan. If you
Yeah,
will.
rootless. Transnational.
All right. Let me go through these really quick. I'm getting a little sleepy, so I might just cut this off. But who hasn't spoken? Okay. 6 Ukima 9.
Yeah, it's Zuki Man. Actually, I just wanted to
Zuki Man
go back to your statements about kind of the I think Fukuyama talked about the end of history, and this is actually more. I don't want to get into the politics of like world geopolitical power, military stuff. I don't want to talk about that so much, even though Fukuyama was really like into that, the last man end of history stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But what you were saying about that kind of like dead end culture, right, where we're just kind of recycling things and putting things out.
Mm-hmm.
Like I didn't expect that conversation, that this space turning into that conversation, but you brought something up that I kind of noticed, and it's kind of funny because that complaint has been around since like 2012 as well. Because I don't know if you remember the Adbusters. There was an issue of Adbusters. I don't know if you remember the publication, but it was on the.
I do know that publication. Yeah, that's interesting. Is that still around?
I don't know. They were they put some stuff out like every 6 months, but it was like, and then it just kind of fizzled. And then magazines just stopped being a thing. And it was still when like Vice was still okay. No. It came out. I remember this. The Adbusters came out with the hipster article, and that was like the end of civilization. I think that was what the title was called for it. I don't know if you remember that piece. But it happened definitely when like Gavin was out of the magazine. Gavin McInnes was out of the magazine. But it was that Adbusters about that, like when we experienced like 2000s hipsterdom, right? You had people that were just kind of retro, subculture kids. Not actually, like the subcultures weren't really new. It was just kind of like, the hipsters were like retro punk or retro post-punk revival. I mean, I think you've noticed that we were already starting to just dress and bring back fashion from the 80s. Now it's the 90s it was bringing back fashion from the 90s again, which is kind of bad because it was like a lot of it's awful and unaesthetic to me.
Mm-hmm.
But then
definitely,
and it was kind of like, man, but you know what? Yeah, I'm afraid to say I was really agreeing with you about, we've been possibly in a postmodern state for maybe it's not hit the 100-year mark, but it's getting kind of there because, when we call everyone hipsters as a subculture, as youth, the word has been around since the 30s. And hipsters were and when you look back at the hipsters and when you see how they dress, you have people. I mean, you still have hipsters doing this where they kind of like to dress up as like flappers or 1930s guys, and they do it like weekly. But now you would call it steampunk cosplay or whatever. But it's now guys that that's how they dress like all the time. And I mean, is it rather worrisome? We're kind of this is all we really have as a culture. That, I mean, you're really into like this ideation of I'm assuming, I don't know if you still do, but this ideation about Western civilization, and I just feel like the world, because of globalization, that's happened. You can't help it, because of the Industrial Revolution and industrial society that has spread everywhere, you have a situation where I feel like Western civilization has evolved into something that's almost incomprehensible. I don't know if you agree or not about this, but it's things have developed in a way where you can't, we're all kind of communicating through the internet, at least speaking English. We're still the Anglosphere is still a very real thing, obviously. But it's not like, I don't know. There's like, I don't know at what point Western civilization has turned into this like global industrial civilization where everyone gets to say whatever, or we're just a modern people, so to speak. Not to say race doesn't exist, biodiversity doesn't exist, but it's becoming a much more strange developed thing of the way things are. And and to call it postmodern makes enough sense, but I'm just kind of I think that's, and what you're saying is that maybe nihilism is good, in some sense a little.
Sometimes, yeah.
So I don't know if you want to call it nihilism though, because I believe, my whole thing is getting offline and kids like starting motorcycle gangs, and then guys who follow me on Twitter know like that's kind of like my agenda now. But we can't even call, there's no I don't want to veer it into politics, but I'll go veer it into politics. So you have like ideologies. People are still, you still have kids, knowing kids that call themselves communists. They still LARP as Marxist revolutionaries. But fascism is so taboo. But it doesn't matter because like everyone, and the established order says you can't, like being a fascist. Sorry, did everyone get muted? Okay. I don't know if you guys could hear me, but like, the established order would say, well, any form of right-wing